My name is Jillian Sidoti. This is Mark. Do you want to say anything?
I'm Mark Roderick. Good morning, everyone. You are the hardy few to have made it back for the second day.
We're going to make your heads explode this morning. We're going to just go through, I think what we're going to do is we're going to go through the outline of what you can expect when you do a Regulation A filing, if that's what you're thinking about doing, and then we're going to share a couple of little stories if we have time, and then we'll take some questions at the end.
So yesterday was actually a terrific day, but a sort of high level, everyone talked about very high level things and how inspirational crowdfunding is and all the opportunities that it presents to communities and investors and entrepreneurs and so forth. Today, we're going to actually, Joey and I are going to talk about when we get back to our offices, what this actually translates into us doing.
Right.
So let me I'll make it's not really a plug, but I wrote a primer, which is on my blog. It's called a Regulation A+ Primer. It's a plain English description of the Regulation A rules. So if you're interested in this area, you might want to take a look at that primer. It's on www.markroderick.net, and it says Regulation A+ Primer. Okay, so let me just start. I'll just ask you a question.
Okay.
What's the first thing, let's say someone in this room wanted to do a Regulation A primer, how would you start the process?
Well, first I want to make sure that they're prepared to do it. You know, that's a huge part. I have a lot of clients who get very enthusiastic, want to get going, like, can I do this, let's do it, how much money do I need? And I kind of have a spiritual moment, if you will, where I want them to really analyze, is this going to work for me? Do I have the infrastructure in place to do the marketing, or am I willing to pay to put it in place? That's a huge component of it. Am I willing to go through ongoing reporting requirements? Am I willing to go through an annual audit? And I kind of go through those pieces and really analyze their situation and what their current network looks like. Because your current network is going to also play a very big role in this. If you don't have a current network, you're certainly not going to get a network by just magically doing a Reg A. It's not magic. And I also make sure the amount of capital that the company wants to raise justifies the expense of doing a Reg A. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'd like to talk to my client about time and cost, because these things are not free, unfortunately, and they're not real fast.
Right.
So I am telling people that it's going to take, I say to people, if on this phone call you say, Mark, I want to do this, and I'm going to start sending you all the material that you want, I tell them it's going to take probably 60 days for us to put the offering documents together. Theoretically, you could do it in 2 weeks, but that's just not how business works, because everyone has something else to do and people go on vacations and their dog gets sick. So realistically, probably 60 days. Do you think that's?
Yeah, I say 30 to 45 days.
Okay.
I give it to, and if we might be talking about two different types of companies here. You're dealing with apples and oranges when you're talking about an operating company versus a brand new startup. I do a lot of real estate funds, for example. So it's always a brand new LLC or brand new LP that has no history, and so the audit can get done in 2 weeks. And I am familiar with real estate offerings, so I can draft in 30 days. So we have, like 30 to 45 days there. But if it was an operating company, I would definitely say it's going to be 60 days, because we have to vet all of the principles, we have to vet what's going on in the company, and really, have the issuer provide us with all the information we need. And usually the delay's on the issuer side.
Yeah, that is. I always say I'm going to do my work fast, but you're going to hold things up.
So true.
So I say, well, let's say 30 to 60 days to
Right.
put together the book, and we're going to talk about what that entails. And then, we're going to tell stories about our SEC experiences, but you're supposed to get your first set of comments back from the SEC, right? This is not you just file a book and start selling. That is absolutely not how it works. You file a book, the SEC is supposed to get back to you with comments in a month.
Right.
You
27
respond.
days, yes.
You respond. They're supposed to get back to you with, and maybe it takes you a week or two to respond just by the time you do it.
Correct.
And they're supposed to get back to you within about 10 days, although Jillian has not been having those good experiences.
Yeah, so I have a client who I put in a Regulation A filing in August. We got our first round of comments, it wasn't 9 comments, it was 16 comments. It's a pretty low number of comments. In the past for Regulation A filings prior to the Jobs Act, I was getting 45, 50 comments. So 16 comments was a very good day in my office. And so I got this back, we responded relatively quickly. They wanted a lot of information on my client, the individual's past experience, prior performance table. It's very typical in a real estate transaction. And so we provided all of that information.
The comments came back as
Asking about the prior performance table. So we gave that information, we provided it back for them. They took another 27 days before they responded to me again. Our comments went down to about, I think, 6 comments. Then they responded again, but it took another 27 days with 3 comments. Then I had to call and call and call, and they took 24 days to get back to me with 3 more comments. 3 comments they could have easily, it was about a typo. And they could have easily called me and said, hey, you have a typo, can you correct it? And it would have been done right there. So now we're about 14 days from that moment, and just this morning, because Mark and I were talking last night, and he's telling me,
Early.
Yeah.
At dinner.
and out here in the hall.
Yeah.
And we're chit-chatting, and he said, I don't have that experience. I've been getting my comments back in 10 days. And being armed with this information gave me a new sense of confidence. So I called them this morning, and I go, look, I want this finished. I want it done. And the SEC calls me back and goes, okay, you've cleared comments. You're good to go. And I was like, yay!
So, I mean, the long and short of that, to make a pun, is that it's hard to tell how long it's going to take to get through the SEC. I would say from the time you submit, if you are through in 60 days, that is quite good.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
So
that's absolutely phenomenal.
if you are through in 90 days, that's pretty good. So now coming back to the starting place, so I tell people, if you decide to go today, if we're selling in 5 months, then we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great statement.
Yeah.
And that's a success right there. And this is actually not that bad, because pre-Jobs Act, it was taking me up to a year to get these things done. So to cut it in the time in half is really quite phenomenal.
Right. So I mean, the SEC, consistent with I think how it's treated crowdfunding throughout, is trying to do a pretty good job.
Right.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning. So that's sort of time frame. It takes a while. Talk about what you do mechanically, the whole getting the CIK codes and what that's all about.
So basically, I don't know how you do it in your office, but we get a power of attorney from the client.
Yes.
And then the power of attorney comes back to us. My office manager signs off on it. He goes and he gets you have to have this whole process where you get it notarized, you upload it to Edgar. If you're not familiar with Edgar, that's the electronic data gathering something system with the SEC. It's basically how they publish information. And so that gets uploaded, and then the system in a couple of days spits out a CIK code, which is your identifier for your company. And then that means you're ready to file. They're ready to accept filings from you. And so then the next thing you need to do is, and you really want to find an efficient one. I don't know how you do it, but we use a service. I use the same service every time, and I don't mind telling you who it is. It's called Discount Edgar. I've been using them since like 2008. And they will, once you're done drafting, you've had your client sign off on it. Well, I say you. Once we're done drafting and you've signed off on it, then we send it over to an Edgarization service. And that, I happen to use Discount Edgar. They prepare it for filing. They do a whole thing with software that has to be done in order to make it proper for upload to the SEC. At that time, they upload it to the SEC. Now, what you really want to do, and you want to make sure your attorney knows to do this, is you want to make sure your first file is filed confidentially. Because you don't want everybody knowing your business before you know your business. So, like comment letters and things like that. So you want to make sure you upload it confidentially. And at that time, that's when the clock starts ticking. Your 27 days begins there, and they have 27 days to review it.
Right, so that, all that is, I don't know how many people here are familiar with the whole Edgar system. These days, you are required, everything you file with the SEC has to be through this electronic Edgar system. So what Jillian was talking about is when the offering circular is all finished, you don't just FedEx it or email it to the SEC. You have to submit it through Edgar, and because of course no ordinary human being, you know, is capable of putting it into the right Edgar format, you actually have to hire a middleman, a third person, who charges, I mean, a not trivial amount.
No. It's like $8 a page.
Yes, yeah. And $8 a page, that's not just the offering circular, that's all the exhibits. So you can have an offering circular that, I don't know what your typical real estate offering circular is, but kind of what I guess that it's about 80 pages.
That's probably correct.
80 pages, so you think, well, that's not too bad, but then you have the operating agreements and the leases and all the other documents. You get into hundreds and hundreds of pages of filings, and it all has to be done through Edgar, and you have to pay for it. And so that's why you use this service. And then each time you resubmit after you get comments, you're paying again, so that it's not a trivial cost, you know, to use this service to file through Edgar.
No, I don't know about your filer, but and I said $8 a page, but that's for 10 Qs, Ks, and public offerings. I'm not sure what they're charging on Regulation A's. Regulation A's get uploaded a little differently. The formatting is a little different. But with that being said, I will say this: my Edgar filer only charges for the red lines. So it's per red lined page,
it's
not
per,
the whole thing.
per change.
Right.
But it can still
still be expensive. Yeah.
Be thousands of additional dollars. And so for us, it's important that we make you, our clients, aware of these things up front, because no one likes to be surprised and say, "Oh, I forgot to tell you."
Right.
There's a $3,000 bill for filing.
For printing.
Yeah.
For printing,
right.
essentially. So what do you think is the next step? Is really you're sitting around. Do you start phone calling the SEC when you get close to the end, or what do you normally do? They usually call you first.
My experience has been that the SEC has been very proactive. They call me. In fact, within a day after I file, I just filed one Monday, and Tuesday a guy from the SEC calls me to tell me, and I'm just wanted to let you know I've got this. I'm going to be the lead examiner, and he says to me, "How should I contact you?" And I said, "Email," and he says, "Well, we don't like email." Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. He says, "We like phone," and I said, "Okay, well then contact me by phone."
Yeah.
So yeah, my experience has been. They've been very proactive. In fact, within the SEC, it's typically not just one person who's examining your offering. Your offering may raise multiple questions. For example, the SEC is very concerned about whether you should be registered as an investment company. But they have an investment company person within the SEC who joins the team. Or they have financial people who review the financial statements, so that person joins the team. And my experience is that all of them separately reach out to you. Do you have that experience?
I get one comment letter
Yes.
and one point person. But so typically what you get when you get your first, the one point person calls you, says, I'm your lawyer at the SEC. I need your email address, because they're going to email you the comment letter. And I also need the email address of your client. Is this typically what's happening
Yes.
with you? So they only want that, not so they can write you love emails or notes, but because they really just want to send you the comment letter that way, and that's it. As a matter of fact, I sent the SEC an email this morning, and they responded with a phone call.
Yes.
They don't, but I wanted to put what I was saying in writing, and they responded with a phone call. With that being said, but they use the email to send you the comment letters. When you get the comment letter, you're going to see the very last paragraph tells you exactly who's involved. And who's involved is your point person, your point attorney, one other attorney, generally speaking, and 2 CPAs, or 2 audit type people financial type people at the SEC. And then it's usually signed by like the senior attorney. So the letter's signed by the senior attorney, but you're not really supposed to call him
Yes.
or her. You're supposed to call your point person if you have any questions. But all 4 or 5 of those people are reviewing your filing.
Yeah, let me add, and then I want to go back and talk with Jillian about the actual preparation of the offering circular and what goes into that. But just, this seems like a time to talk about it. We were talking last night again, here, and comparing war stories. And it became so obvious, now this may be predictable, but it became so obvious that our experience in getting responses from the SEC depends so much on which individual in the SEC you get. You know, you can hit the lottery or you can lose the lottery. So, because, I mean, it's not surprising, right? I mean, people are different people and personalities, and that they have a good day that day. But I filed a Regulation A offering for a guy who deals in distressed mortgages, and hopefully, I mean, that has taken way too long. The reason it's taken way too long is because the SEC keeps alleging that these are so-called asset-backed securities within the meaning of the Dodd-Frank Act. They are not asset-backed securities or anything close to it within the meaning of the Dodd-Frank Act. But the SEC keeps coming back with comments, well, you haven't convinced us. And we've just spent a huge amount of time learning everything there has ever been known about asset-backed securities and writing about it and the history and on and on and on. My friend Jillian here told me, when I told her that story, I was whining and complaining. She said, well, that's interesting, Mark, because I submitted a Regulation A offering for a guy doing distressed mortgages, and they didn't even raise asset-backed securities.
Not even a little bit.
So, I mean, that, you know, made my blood boil. But that's a perfect example of something that my client has literally spent well more than $10,000 and 2 months dealing with, and her client, just because she got a different examiner, didn't have to deal with it all.
Not even a little bit. Like literally that particular offering, I was telling Mark, you know, similar offerings, similar assets, and that offering, I got so few comments on my first round. I got 7 comments on my first round that I didn't believe it, and I called the SEC to make sure that I wasn't going to be blindsided by another comment letter after the fact. So I mean, it is a roll of the dice. You cannot ask for a particular attorney. It goes into the order of it comes in, order it goes out to be assigned, and so you're really, really at their whim, if you will.
Do you have a question?
Yes, on this example, would it ever make sense to withdraw the filing and resubmit in the hope of getting a quicker SEC?
I don't.
A better guy.
I don't think so. I don't think so. You probably, if you tried that, you probably every subsequent filing you've ever made would be held up. You know, they wouldn't like that.
It won't work that way either, because the minute it gets uploaded and is assigned, you're their
Yeah.
client until they leave the department or the SEC. And I had that happen recently. I had a client of mine who submitted a Reg A without me about a year before the Jobs Act passed, and it was delayed, and I knew his attorney on the other side, and I was like, yeah, that's just going to happen with that guy. And so it kept getting delayed, and then he got to the point where he literally had one comment, and then June 19th rolled around, and he said, listen, I don't even know what to do anymore. I got to get this done. Can you help me out? And I said, sure, I'll help you out, but I'm going to redo the entire thing now because the form doesn't work anymore. So what happened at June 19th when the Jobs Act went into effect is the SEC also changed the way you submit this stuff to the SEC. So I had to redo the entire filing. It wasn't that heavy of lifting. I don't want to make it sound that dramatic. What it meant was I rearranged the entire thing and added a couple of sections. That's really all it meant. So I submitted it, and boy, do I now wish that guy was still there. He left the department, so we got assigned a new attorney, and she decided, I'm gonna review this entire thing, and I'm gonna give you a whole new set of comments. So we went from one comment to 9 comments.
Now that, you didn't tell me that last night.
Oh, I didn't. I'm sorry.
When
Well,
we were
I wanted
talking.
to. I think I wanted to save that for this.
Yeah, that
today.
is a great, because that is the real life illustration. My theory is that if you took an offering that had been approved 2 years ago and you changed the names
Yeah.
and you resubmitted it, you would get, 16 comments.
Right.
And that sounds like exactly what happened to you.
It's
You were
exactly
down to
that.
one comment and took the same thing and got more.
Yeah.
Okay, so
We have a question over here.
we have a question over here.
Just a quick question. You've been doing a lot of filings for real estate and what have you. When you do something like a completely different offering, do you find the timetables are way different? Does the SEC head start spinning because it's something new or different?
Well, in the case of, it depends on how new or different it is. Honestly, your counselor, whoever your attorney is going to really help you and know exactly what's going to happen. So I've done things I've submitted offerings in film, I've submitted offerings in biotech, internet development companies, whatever it might be, but it's always the same paces that you go through. Do I have every section that the SEC is going to want? Have I made every disclosure? Am I defining all the terms correctly, and does it flow through correctly so that if anybody was reading this, they would understand what was going on? And if you come, and that's the other thing you have to think about too, that the SEC is made up of human beings, and they're limited in their capacity for what they know. So you have to make sure that they can understand what you're writing, just like any other person understands what you're writing. And if you can do that, you can do it for any industry.
Yeah, I think it can cut both ways, personally. New stuff can be confusing, and they really don't like making mistakes. How much time do we have, Sydney?
You have about another 10 minutes.
Okay, good. So they don't like making mistakes, and if they're going to make a mistake, they're going to make a mistake on the side of conservatism, not letting something through. So I just filed this week what I think is the first Regulation A offering for a crowdfunding platform. I think it is. And I'm at the same time excited about it, but I'm also quite apprehensive about if this is the first one of these they've ever seen, what the heck are they even going to look at? So I'm concerned about that. On the other hand, with real estate, they get so many real estate deals. Sometimes I think that they are extra concerned to make sure that they don't miss anything,
Right.
or to make sure that this filing looks exactly like all the other real estate filings that they've approved. So maybe they give you less leeway to be a little different.
I'd have to agree with that. So when you do a real estate filing, you actually have to do it slightly different than every other industry. There's extra sections, if you will, in a real estate filing. And even if those sections do not apply to your particular deal,
Yes.
you have to put them in. I've had many times where the SEC, one of their comments is you missed item 12. Well, item 12 has nothing to do with this business. All right, I'll put it in, like policy with respect to certain policies or
Yes.
something.
No, they do. I've submitted them, and I have the information in a section, and it's just clear and simple. And one of their comments is, please, following Industry Guide 5.
Yeah.
Following Industry Guide 5, please put this in tabular format.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we take the information and put it in a table that's not nearly as clear, but that's an example. So that's a good segue. Talk about what an offering circular looks like. Probably a lot of the people here and a lot of people, the millions who will be watching this instead of the Grammys next year, are used to seeing a private placement memo. So
Right.
talk a little bit about how this compares to a typical private placement memo.
You know, it's very similar in a lot of respects. It has the risk factors, it has a summary, it has a business description, it has a tax section, all of those things that are very similar to a private placement memorandum. What really changes is the legends up front and saying how this is all going to operate. The suitability standards are going to change, because obviously a suitability standards under a Reg A, the whole reason why we do them is so that the little guy can invest, and that is not so in most private placement memorandums. And really, you just have to have you have to have stricter policies and how you're going to seat your board and what management's really going to get and all of these other things, and it has to be in a very strict format. Form 1A requires it to be in a very specific format. Would you agree?
Yeah, very specific format, and I would say more extensive.
Right.
More extensive disclosure.
Exactly.
It is a real, hopefully, by the time you read an offering circular, you know everything there is to know about that business. You know who its competitors are, you know what its particular business challenges are, you know what its revenue sources are, you know what its expenses are, you know the management structure inside out. One of the things the SEC cares about, quite justifiably, for example, is insider transactions, transactions between the company that the investors are getting stock in and the folks who own the company, the president, the CEO. So is the founder leasing real estate to the business? Is the founder licensing technology? So you have to get into that at a very, very granular detail. You have to summarize every material contract. So that, in a typical PPM, you're going to, summarize the operating agreement.
Yeah.
But in an offering circular, much more detail about contracts, I would say.
Yeah.
Just a generally very robust disclosure document.
Absolutely, and that's why you really need to hire an attorney that knows what they're doing, because otherwise you'll be because once you get in there into the SEC and they see you don't know what they're doing, they will punish you for it. So you really want to have an attorney who knows how to put that into right order, proper disclosure, you're going to see things in your Reg A filing that after you get it back from your attorney and go, why are you saying this? This is totally irrelevant. And you said it 20 times throughout the document. And you got to trust your securities attorney. They know what they're doing, because otherwise, if you'll be in comment hell if that happens.
So how do you work with a client to start drafting the offering circular?
Well, first I try to make sure that they touch as little as possible.
So in other words, when the client says to you, let me draft it, you just look at it.
No.
Have you ever heard that before?
Yeah.
Can
I
I
heard it
help and
yesterday.
make it cheaper?
Yeah, can I make it cheaper I'll write it for you.
If you want to
Right.
make it more expensive,
That's
you
right,
write
it'd
it
be more
for
expensive
me.
if
Yeah,
you did.
exactly.
So, but what's the process that you use?
We do a process where we do about a 45-minute interview with them when we finally have them engaged, where we call it our deal structure questionnaire. I ask them, what do you want to pay your investors? How do you want to structure it? And you'll be surprised how many people don't think about some of the things I ask them about. So the reason why it takes 45 minutes is because they go, I don't know, what do you suggest?
Yeah.
And you can rely on your counsel for that. It's your business, and you should come prepared to that type of intake meeting. But it's still your business. but you're welcome to ask your attorney, you know, what have you typically seen? You know, going backwards for a second to the more disclosure, I've got a funny story for all of you. I did an offering, a public offering for a real estate fund a couple of years ago, and I thought, I'm gonna hedge against every comment possible. You know, I'm getting all gung-ho here.
Yeah.
And so I put a laundry list of risk factors, ridiculous amount of risk factors. One of the comments the SEC came back with was, remove half of these risk factors. You're leading people to believe that these risk factors actually, like the risk factors were a misrepresentation of where we were in our business, because you don't, like, for example, our tenants might not pay rent and therefore we're not going to cash flow appropriately. And the response was, you don't have any tenants, so that's not a risk to you right now, so remove it.
Oh, now that's, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that, right? Because you do, I mean, I like, the SEC gives you these general instructions, gives us instructions. We want clear writing, we don't want you to be repetitive, we don't want you to overstate the risks. But in reality, you know, that's really not what they want. But I'm glad, I was looking on the plane here, I was reviewing someone else's offering document for a retirement community. And one of the risks listed is terrorism.
Oh, yeah.
There's terrorism is a risk to this retirement community. and I just thought, what the hell are you talking about? Why not list Ebola? You know,
Yeah.
you know. So I'm actually glad. So they actually told you take some of the risks out.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
So it's funny, it just vacillates, and you just have to have, you really got to have patience. This is a game of patience, and you really got to come prepared with patience and
then so you have this interview with them, and then you start writing it, and
Right.
then you start sending your client drafts and sort of go back and forth.
correct. Do you have a similar experience?
Yeah. Now I will give you some. I mean, my legal advice is I write those questions down. I
Yeah.
kind of have a standard
Oh, yes.
email questionnaire. I say, what's your deal with the investors?
Yeah.
You know, I also ask clients to tell me the risks that they see for their business, because there are always going to be things that I'm not aware of.
That
What-
is one of my questions.
Okay.
Mhm.
And you know, the typical client reaction to that is there aren't any. You know, no risks. This is
Or
a
conflicts of interest. Do you guys have any special conflicts of interest?
right. No.
Except that you're a real estate agent and you're going to take a commission for the purchase. That kind of idea.
So I phrase it to them, instead of talking about the risk to your business, pretend that you are an investor in someone else's business that happens to do what you do. Knowing what you do, tell me all the things you would be concerned about.
That's great.
But they typically still, I have to invent most of the risk factors myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and typically they're pretty rote in a lot of ways, and then there's some really specialized ones, and it depends on how complicated you get the deal. Sir, you had a question
Yeah,
over
we
here.
have a general counsel, so we're not small, we're about 100 million revenue we've done over the last 4 years.
Mhm.
So we have a general counsel, and how would you work with general counsel in terms of this? I mean, most situations I've seen that we write our own MD&A and we send it over to you guys, and you guys work with that. How would that work?
It depends on your, I'm sure Jillian has the same experience. I work with a lot of in-house counsel, and there's no one way. Some in-house counsel view themselves as just kind of gatekeepers, and I do it all.
Okay.
Other in-house counsel, particularly if they were a securities lawyer or are a securities lawyer, you know, if that's their main thing, then they may draft it first. If your in-house counsel is not a securities lawyer, he or she would probably have us do all of
So
it.
you would interview us to write the MD&A? I mean, is that the part of the 45 minutes? I figure it's longer than 45 minutes to understand the business, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would generally be interfacing with your general counsel.
Okay.
And I would send a list of questions to him or her, and then he or she, notice I keep saying he or she here, that's good, would probably interface with you, and then we would probably all get on the phone together, because invariably there are a lot of questions that I've asked you that you don't have answers for. and that you actually, as Jillian said, may be looking to me to answer for you. What should the deal structure be? What are the alternatives? So after I send you this list and you mull it over, we would all typically either meet in person or more likely get on the phone together or get on Skype together to go through it. But the general answer is however your general counsel is comfortable working. I'm sure you've had the same experience.
So I actually have exactly the same experience, and I'm going through the same experience right now. I have one huge company that has about $650 million in future real estate projects coming up. And their general counsel is totally clueless when it comes to securities laws or even complex deal structure. He's more of a real estate attorney.
Yeah.
So he's completely, he looks at me with eyes glazed over like, I don't even want to talk about this. I'll look at it later. Just do it, okay? And then I have another gentleman who has general counsel in Colorado, and it's a totally opposite experience. We're collaborating, we're working together, we're dividing and conquering, essentially. So it really just depends on the what your general counsel wants, and I'm willing to work with anything. You know, you got to have respect for other people in the industry, and so that's the posture I usually take. You know that business better than I do. Tell me how you want this to go, and I will, be malleable into that circumstance.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
Two questions. Can you comment on supplemental material, sales material, and how that fits with the offering circular? And can you imagine what the examiner's response would be if a company, say, was raising $5-10 million, new company, and said, our ability to maintain ongoing reporting obligations may be not so good because we're going to take all the money and spend it on product development, and we'll know at the end if it works. It won't be. It'll take a year, say, to develop. Basically saying that a company could use a public offering to, in sort of a non-standard way, to say, crowdfunding to do product development, and as such, I may not fit your normal
That happens all the time. That's a very typical thing. So, yeah.
I mean, they are, to take your second, now I've already forgotten your first question, but.
Supplemental sales material.
Oh, I thought that was your second question. Oh, no, that's right. Yeah, I have had, the SEC in my deals has asked to see supplemental sales materials.
Right.
And their concern is that the sales materials are too fluffy. They want to see there's a phrase that I'm not
Very great.
now a balance between reward and risk.
Yeah.
So I have definitely in all my offerings they've asked to see supplemental sales.
Yeah, it's part of the exhibits. And also there's certain legends that need to be placed on that supplemental sales material. So you actually want to make sure that's on there, period, because here's the thing, if you don't have that legend on there and a state securities board sees it, you're going to get a subpoena from a state securities board because they don't understand what you're trying to do. They might think you're just doing a general solicitation that's illegal. So yeah.
Do you monitor after an offering is authorized or effective? If you change your selling material or add some material?
You just upload it to Edgar. Okay. It's really not a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, but there's an important point there, and particularly for real estate deals, because in the private real estate world, we're used to seeing certain claims. We see claims like 15% IRR, 8% cash on cash. Do you want to talk about the rules in Regulation A filings under Industry Guide 5 and otherwise for making claims about rates of return?
I do. We will put on our advertising, and we've had it approved by the SEC that you can put a preferred return. If you're offering a preferred return that is a stated return within documents, you can say that. You can't project.
See, that's the thing. Yeah. You can say.
Yeah.
There is an 8% preferred return. If that is clearly described as, all that means is that if we make any money, you will get your 8% first. Right. What you cannot say is you should expect a 14% IRR on this project over its life. And that's what you see in the private real estate world all the time. But you are not allowed to say that. Now I have to tell you just another anecdotal story about it depends on which examiner you pull. So it is totally traditional to talk about, you know, this 8% preferred return, because we all understand what that means. We're not promising you 8%.
Right.
We're just saying if we make any money, you get yours first. So in my deal, which is not a real estate deal, we have a similar waterfall. It's a 12% preferred return, and it's explained what this, and the freaking SEC, my examiner, comes back and says, you can't mention a 12% return. You can't mention it.
No.
Because it's not guaranteed, and my blood is boiling. I say, you know, what are you talking about? This is just a preferred return.
Right,
it's,
exactly.
it's like a 12% preferred stock. And are you really telling me, SEC, that in this disclosure document, I am not allowed to disclose the heart of the economic deal with investors?
Well, it's funny because that all goes back to the examiner. Because I can tell you, I have put through multiple deals with the stated return. Sometimes in tiered structures, if you invest more than $25,000, you get this. If you invest more than that, you get this, so on and so forth. And I can put that through and not get questioned about that at all. Where I have all these complicated rates of return, advertise them up the wazoo, and then the next guy's like, we're not gonna let you put that in there. Take it out, make no mention of the preferred return whatsoever. Well, it's in the operating agreement.
Yeah,
So,
and so just as a defense of lawyers and how much these things cost, so you see actually a fairly significant amount of the cost is after you file. Dealing with the SEC and dealing with the individual examiner's own personal biases, I probably shouldn't say biases, but concerns, that's part of what goes into this whole thing. It is not a cookie cutter,
No.
we just file this, start selling securities.
Right.
So, okay, yes,
I
ma'am.
was just wondering if you can touch on costs we should expect overall for filing.
you know what, I'm gonna say this because you're gonna get I think you might get two different answers here, and so you should call either one of us or call both of us.
No, what do you quote people?
Okay, so we typically charge a flat fee from beginning to end of $50,000, inclusive of first year reporting, because I don't want you trying that by yourself. So we include that in the
No,
cost.
I estimate people today about $50,000. So it's quite interesting. I know there are law firms in New York who do a fixed fee of $125.
Right, yeah.
So, but that's New York. Okay, did you have a question?
Yeah, the timing of the offerings, is there a limit as to how long the offering will be out there, an expiration of the offering?
Yeah, well, it's 12 months. Your qualification is for 12 months, but you can then requalify at the end of your qualification period. The requalification is way easier than the initial process.
And can you keep requalifying? You have to
You can requalify, and every year that you want to sell, you have to requalify.
Right.
But if you don't want to requalify, I'm actually dealing with this right now because I'm doing a note offering where we're selling notes, but the notes have a renewable period at the end of 2 years, and the SEC's like, no, you can't have that renewable period unless you're willing to qualify every single year that you're going to allow the renewal. So yeah, you could do like a $50 million offering if you don't sell all of your securities, or even if you do sell all your securities, you can go back and qualify again in the month.
Now, in terms of cost, I just want to say, we are of course just talking about legal costs. The accounting cost is extra, but not very much. Accounting costs have come way down. Time to stop?
Yeah.
But advertising, marketing, there's no limit on the amount you are allowed to pay your advertising firm. And depending on what you're trying to sell, you can spend a lot. Okay, I hope we've given you.
One last question.
One last question.
We have about 250,000 customers in our customer list on our distribution list. We fill out their names and stuff. I would bet about 25-30% are overseas, in Australia and the UK.
Yeah.
Can they participate?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes, but you can do that two ways. They can either participate in a Reg A offering, or if for some reason you felt like it, you could just carve them off and do a Regulation S offering, and then you wouldn't have it, like you could just market to them if you wanted to without going through Regulation A. Market to the offshore people through Regulation S at a almost zero cost. Okay, hopefully we've given another last question.
So I've gotten my filing through, and I have the fortune of knowing a sheikh somewhere in the Arab world, and he wants to have an Arabic version of it so he can look at it and understand it. What's the SEC do about that?
That's allowed. All you have to do is you have to put a risk factor in there that says this document was originally written in English and therefore might not translate properly into the next language, but you can.
So that's trivial for them.
Yeah, because it's all under regulation. That's under Regulation S. I mean, you can put a component in there under Regulation S, so they don't really care about
Yeah,
that.
they don't care. You have to remember the U.S. government, just as the government of whatever Middle Eastern country he lives in doesn't care about you, our government doesn't care about him.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay,
Running out
we're
of
all
time.
done.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. I'm sorry for